Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is part 2 of our 3-part series on caregiving reflections during the pandemic. In the first 2 parts, we're interviewing and talking with family caregivers to hear what it's been like for them during the pandemic. And then in the 3rd part, we're actually going to talk about the themes that came up during our conversations. What are the problems and what are the solutions? This is August 2021, and we know that we're moving into perhaps a difficult fall and winter. What can we do right now to help with any problems that might come up? So I'm thrilled and delighted to introduce you to 3 family caregivers who are joining us today. So Mark Survey, who cares for his son, is with us. Hi, Mark.
Hi, glad to be here.
Rachel's with us. Rachel Hiles cares for her grandmother. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Sharon Hall is with us, and Sharon cares for her husband. And she also supported her son through a cancer journey, and fingers crossed, he is in remission and 100% healthy. So Sharon, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so let's start with the question I started with in part 1, which is, what was your worry when the pandemic started? Thinking back to March of 2020. Mark, what was your worry?
First and foremost, it was about Lucas. So the cardiac and the pulmonology aspect of his Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which he's been inflicted with, that pulmonology thing is a pretty big deal when we're talking about COVID, right? So the worry was, and I was traveling at the time, and right before kind of things got shut down where they kind of stopped travel for companies. And my biggest concern was I was going to bring something home. In fact, on the last flight home, coming out of Kentucky, I sat next to a gentleman that came from overseas, and he was talking about the CDC coming on the plane and checking somebody out because they felt ill. I'm like, maybe you shouldn't talk to me anymore at this point. You're a nice guy, but I don't think I want any breathing going on for the rest of this flight. So I already had masked up, and I had my N95 mask, one of the few that I had left. And yeah, so I came home and I actually quarantined anyway, just because we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. And it was about for 5 days and didn't have any symptoms, and we were good. And at that point, it was being homebound. So I felt we had a little bit more control as long as we were, we were in our ecosystem, and I didn't have to come across too many people.
So you masked up early.
I did.
Yeah, that's my regret. I mean, I really had a goal of 0. I didn't get it and I didn't give it. But I think back to those early days and I think I was without a mask, following the guidelines. But you know what? What's the harm in wearing a mask? So you were smart. You were smart.
I tried.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's just go to, okay, the follow-up question to I tried then. So just tell us earlier this year what happened.
Well, we got COVID. So, about a year later, what had happened is we had some remodeling done in the house. And we believe that some of the subcontractors who weren't masking up properly, we think we had a cross contaminant there. So we ended up with COVID. And I remember it was a Friday. I think it was the 1st of January, if I recall correctly. And I remember I wasn't feeling great, but Irma was really, really sick. And Lucas started getting a fever. And I'm like going, okay, we're in for it. So immediately I went into caregiver dad mode. And so I'm like, all right, I want to get a little preemptive here. I know we can take steroids for this, he's going to need, and I started to make those calls and do those things. And I learned a lot about Lucas's current care structure. And unfortunately, learning a lot wasn't a lot of good that came out of it. So the help that we primarily got was from a virtual doctor who prescribed at least me a whole cocktail of meds just in case I needed to somehow function through it. I never used any of them, thank goodness, but I had them on hand. And then Lucas's primary doctor did give him an inhaler just in case. But that was about the best he was going to be able to do. The rest of the specialists just not available, nothing. In fact, one of them said, let the emergency room take care of it if you need to. And that's not an option. So we learned quite a bit about his care right now, and we're reevaluating it as we go. But yeah, it wasn't spectacular. I think there were some realities that really came out of that.
Oh, wow. So you were so cautious. I think that speaks to how cautious and careful you are. And yet that's the disease. It's so infectious.
We were lucky because it wasn't very strong, right? So we were able to get through. In fact, Lucas, he had a fever, he had a little bit of body ache, and then he felt the best for the next 2 weeks out of all of us. So no respiratory, no oxygen problems as far as the oximeter readings or anything else. So he actually was the stellar patient through it. I could barely move. It took me out for a good 2 weeks. Irma did okay. She had her days where she was good and bad, but yeah, I think I got the sore muscles and everything. And it just, there wasn't anything I was going to be able to do, but we still kept caregiving. We had no choice, right?
Right. Yeah. We're going to talk in just a few minutes about bringing help in. So Rachel, let's go to you. So what was your worry in March 2020?
Well, so in March 2020, my grandmother had just fallen about a month prior to that and landed in the hospital with a touch of pneumonia. And she was sent home on hospice. And I had spent like a couple of weeks going back and forth from my house to her house every single day to spend the night, because I did have coverage during the wake hours. And I quickly grew tired of that. So I started looking for a house for us to buy, with a realtor from Grandma's church. And we found a house. We closed. We were, doing all the paperwork at the end of February, and then we were supposed to close on this house at the end of March. And so we were literally closing on this house and moving in at the very beginning of everything shutting down. And so my realtor's like, you need to get your stuff in there and get in there. And then you need to get Grandma in there, because I was going to wait. I wanted to get the house ready for her to come in here and, have it set up like it was actually a home. And so my biggest worry was getting all of that done and arranged and settled in, because I had a feeling we were going to be here, for quite a while. So that was one of my biggest things. I was literally moving right before everything shut down. And, looking back, there was a great amount of risk in that, because I was, had quite a few of my friends, and who knows where they go, helping me out. So that was probably my biggest worry at that point. But moving her in with me relieved a lot of the stress I probably would have had that not happened. So there was a very serendipitous timing as far as that goes.
Absolutely. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. So Sharon, what was it like for you in terms of worries, March 2020?
My son Brian, he was in the middle of chemo. It was not exactly the best time to have something that's contagious with very little immunity in your system. So he had started chemo in October of 2019. So he eventually ended up stopping before he was supposed to have 12 chemo treatments, and he ended up only doing 10 because his blood was just too low. They were too afraid of him getting COVID. So he stopped at 10. They felt that he was pretty safe stopping at 10. So, but he had, stage 3 colon cancer. And so he had surgery in September of 2019, started chemo in October. So he was like right in the thick of it. And we just didn't want him to get anything. And so we were very, very cautious. And had groceries delivered, wiped them all down. I mean, we were really cautious. And in April, at the end of April, Rod started feeling bad and had a fever, no cough, just a fever, and just basically felt unwell. We were so afraid he had COVID. So we went and had a COVID test, and they got it back to us the next day, and it was negative. So, the doctor's office wasn't open, nothing was open. So they said, take him to urgent care and let them take a look at him. And so they did, and he had pneumonia, but it was aspiration pneumonia because he has dementia and he was having swallowing issues. And so he had aspiration pneumonia. So we went to the hospital, and that was fun. They said, you have to wait in the car. And I said, he has behavior variant frontotemporal dementia. I had a big black eye at the time. I had fallen on the porch. I had a big old black eye. And I said, if you take him, he's your responsibility. Please don't call me. I'm not, if I leave, I leave. I'm sorry. And so then they discussed it and decided they would let me come into the emergency room with him, which I did. They did another COVID test, and that one turned out to be negative as well, but they put us in isolation. Well, we were in the emergency room, and then they said they were going to keep him because he had pneumonia and his oxygen went pretty low, but he has a DNR. So, there was no intubation considered or anything. So I said, if you're going to keep him, are you going to have a sitter? And they were like, well, I'm not sure. Of course, they had to run around and figure that out. And he back said I could stay the night. And I said, and then you'll have a sitter? Well, we'll have to see. And I said, hey, I have an appointment tomorrow morning I have to go to. I was in the middle of I had a questionable mammogram. I was in the middle of doing a biopsy, and I look how it was just a nightmare. So they did let me go out and come back in. I stayed with him the whole time, but we were sequestered to the room. We couldn't leave. When he started to feel better after all the antibiotics, he went to the door and stuck his head out, and they were like, get back in your room. He goes, my feet are not out of the room. So DVFTD was a good time. Nobody knew what it was. Had explained to everybody that came in. So it was not a COVID experience, but it was a hospitalization during COVID. So, that was difficult. That was difficult especially when people were not being in, caregivers were not allowed in. And I just said, I don't care if I have to go to the top. You better let me in with him or you're not going to be happy. So especially when he isn't feeling well, he gets pretty, I knew that he would pull out the IVs, where is Sharon, pull out the ox. I mean, I knew he would be not good. So fortunately, everybody was quite surprised that I got to go in and that I got to stay. But that was a good thing. Later in the year, in October, I had to go in during COVID. My gallbladder, I had to have gallbladder surgery. It was like, what else? So yeah, COVID, we pretty much lost that year. I mean, 2020 was just, in fact, when I think about how long ago did something happen, I don't even consider 2020. I was like, well, this, because I always relate to what happened. And, Brian was diagnosed in August of 19. Mom passed away in March of 19 here at home in hospice. So it was like 2020 never happened. It was like, I don't know where.
Sharon, can I ask you about Adult Day? Because Rod, your husband, attended Adult Day. That got shut down. How long was that shut down?
He stopped going, and when everything started shutting down, they shut down. So I'm thinking it was maybe April here. You were in Georgia, so we're the Wild West. We stay open no matter what. And so I think it was April they shut down. He did not go back until May of this year.
So it was shut down for 13 months.
They've opened back up.
Wow.
But since he had had the aspiration pneumonia, and vaccines weren't, readily available at that, and people were sometimes slow to get them. The doctor said no, he can't go back and be exposed. So we had to wait it out, and finally we went back in May when the entire staff and every attendee had been vaccinated. So it was a while.
So my mom has home health. She's on and off depending on what her situation is, but right now she's back on, but she's always had the same bath aide who comes every week. And when vaccinations were readily available, the shower aide told my mom she was not going to get vaccinated. So then we had a conversation about what do we do about this unvaccinated employee going into my parents' small apartment. But to me, as I was reading about the staffing shortages, I was more worried that my mom would go without than if she had the risk of someone coming into the apartment. So we weighed the risk, and so we keep her bath aid. But I wondered for Mark and Rachel, if you encountered any problems with unvaccinated help and how you worked through that. Mark, let's start with you.
So we had problems getting help prior to all of this going down, right? So it's been on our shoulders. Irma and I have been, there. Irma does it while I'm working. And then as soon as I punch out the clock, I tag in and then we duo it at night. And then we get to sit and watch a non-operating or on TV, like it's on kind of thing, just to bring it down for the day. But the help that we had, had left a while ago. We couldn't find consistent help to begin with before that. We definitely knew when COVID hit that we weren't getting any. Even family, we just, if they weren't going to be vaccinated, and even before vaccine, if they weren't going to mask up, we couldn't take the chance, right? And then once we actually got COVID, we were a little bit more relaxed, knowing that we had antibodies and we knew enough we had a bit of a window, but still it was about, just kind of those precautions. And then the vaccine started coming out shortly after that. Right now, knowing that we're in talks to get boosters after 8 months and things like that, I still would be very hesitant of having somebody unvaccinated come into the house and do that. That would be a really hard decision. I mean, we're kind of doing it, so it's easy for us, but that's what we do. If we weren't able to do all the things, I don't know how we could deal with it. I think we would have to try to just figure it out, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, we talked about it regularly, and it always came back to my mom accepts help from Shirley. The greater risk was that she would not have help. I still struggle a little bit with that, but that's how we looked at it. Man, I'll tell you what, it is hard. Okay, so Rachel, you have help coming in. So tell us how you worked through that to keep the help.
So, well, when we moved here, I had a full roster of caregivers. I had somebody here during the day, and then I had a gal coming in the evenings, and I had a couple of women sharing the weekends. And they hung with me for a while. It was really, everything was shut down, so nobody was going anywhere. They weren't going to work. So, I felt okay with them, still coming. But then when, June came, everything started kind of opening back up. And my evening gal, who had been with us for quite a little while, she worked at a gym, and she was planning to go back. And so she thank God she made the difficult decision for me, but she let me know, I think that me going back to work is going to put your grandmother at too much risk, so I'm just not going to be able to come back to work. And, it was a sad thing at the time because we, grown very attached to her. But honestly, I really respect the fact that she considered us first, above profit or anything else. I could kind of see that it was going to be very difficult to replace her. And by that point, I kind of have been, grown used to being with grandma all the time, pretty much by myself. So I just made the decision not to replace that time because that was coming out of pocket anyway. It was past the insurance dollars, that they would cover. So it kind of fell down, eventually it was just me. And then I have my little cousin who I hired right before, COVID happened, and she's been with us. And then another gal who's always done the weekends, and her son has a developmental disability. So she also has to be extra careful. And so I just made it, very clear to them that I expected them to wear masks and wash their hands frequently. They had to come in and wash their hands immediately. I never did require masks in the home because I felt like it would be upsetting to my grandma because they're not really healthcare providers. And so I just, really emphasized that everybody needed to be very careful. There were a couple times people went certain places, and so they had to wear a mask for a while once, they were back. Hospice, we've had hospice for over a year now, actually almost a year and a half. And, when all that stuff was going on, I refused the pretty much everything I could possibly refuse. I refused it because I didn't know where those people are going and to whose houses, and they weren't going into the facility much and to start with. But we did not have the bath aid come for a good 6 months. We were doing the baths ourselves. So and I have not to date found. I actually have had one person added to the roster who's a really good friend of mine, actually, but I haven't looked for anybody. I know there's a huge shortage, and I just kind of figured, it is what it is, and I don't see finding anybody who will really fit in over here at this point. So it's just kind of us.
Sharon, how about for you? So Adult Day Center closes. It's you. How did you manage? How did you work through? Should I bring in help, or was it never even an option?
Wasn't even an option. I just, between Brian and Rod, I just couldn't take the chance of anybody coming in. So we toughed it out. We're still ordering groceries. Of course, I started that 2017 when I broke my femur and was down for the count and had 2 of them to take care of. I started using the delivery from groceries. So I was pretty familiar with that. So that was pretty easy for me to, put in place when the pandemic came. So we didn't go to the grocery store much anyway. Usually we ordered and picked it up, but we didn't even do that. We had it delivered and left outside the door and the whole 9 yards. So, but as far as the isolation is concerned, I mean, it was just, that's the way you always live when you have someone with dementia. People go away like ants. They run like ants. I don't know if they think it's contagious or they just don't know what to say to a person. And Rod still has pretty good cognition, but people just left. Brian and Amy were always there, but we had the issue with Brian because we didn't want them coming in and, heaven forbid, getting something here. So they did come on occasion, but well masked and everything. And Amy had to stop traveling because she travels for business. She stopped traveling. In fact, she said, "I'm not traveling," because Brian was still in chemo. So she said, "That's it. I'm staying home." But it was kind of just business as usual for us. It was like we had things that kept Rod occupied, and he could go out in the yard. It wasn't like he couldn't go outside, and so that we sit on the back porch and stuff. And we have a large backyard, so it was nice. We'd watch the birds and what have you. We kept our routine. It was, this is the time we eat. This is the time we do this and that. So it was kind of business as usual for us as far as the isolation is concerned.
Yeah, that's interesting because we had a presenter meeting before this event. And so Barbara was saying that a lot didn't really change for her during COVID. And you guys are all saying yes.
I
Yeah.
really agree with that.
Yeah. Welcome to dementia caregiving, or any caregiving, actually.
Yep.
People have a tendency to just run. I don't know if they think that they're afraid that you're going to ask them to do something, or I have no idea why people our neighbors have always been wonderful. So if I needed something, like I couldn't get toilet paper, in the beginning, everybody was hoarding it, and I couldn't get out to go to 15 stores to look. So I would put a text out there to all my neighbors saying, "Hey guys, if anybody sees toilet paper, we're on our last roll." And so a couple of times my neighbors brought toilet paper for us because, I was ordering from one place and I couldn't, and all these places you have to have a minimum if they, for them to deliver and stuff. Toilet paper doesn't make the minimum. So that was difficult. That part was difficult. When people were hoarding things, that was difficult because I had to depend on everybody else to be on the lookout for, toilet paper. Who knew?
Mark, I'm curious, are you back to traveling with work?
No, not at all. I'm still home, and now with the uptick, I don't plan on making any trips for this year. Most definitely, the only trips I'm going to be making are to my parents, maybe my mother-in-law's, but outside of that, I think that's it. I mean, I still have to run out and do things and get things and all that other good stuff, even though we do have things delivered as well. But no, I'm not traveling for work, and that will be, in the sand for sure. I'm not crossing that line for a little bit yet. This has got to get a little bit better.
Yeah. I'm curious if you guys have made any kind of rule around supporting businesses with vaccinated workers. Now, this is a little bit of a political conversation, I know, but I had an experience going to get a massage at the end of July. And I went through all the protocols that the massage place asked me to go through happily. I want to be safe and I want to promote safety. And then when I walked in after going through all the protocols, it occurred to me, how do I know they're going through protocols? So I asked one of the employees, "Are you vaccinated?" And he said yes. And then he said something like, "But I'm not sure about her." And I thought, oh my heavens, that probably is not a good thing to say to me, because then I walked down the hallway, there's my massage therapist, she's wearing a mask. And I said, "Are you vaccinated?" And she said no, and she was not wearing her mask correctly. So I said, you need to wear your mask correctly. And she said, "Are you uncomfortable?" And I debated about it. And I looked at this little room where we were going to spend 90 minutes. She left the room. I started taking off my shoes and I thought, this is going to be the most stressful experience that I probably will have this year. So I am not staying. So I said, "I'm not comfortable." I walked back out. I went to the front desk and I said, "I'd like to have a vaccinated therapist." And they gave me such a hard time about it. It's against HIPAA, they said, which is not correct. That is not correct. I said, "That is not correct." And then they continued to argue with me. And then I said, "I'd like to speak to the manager, your franchise owner." And they said, "Well, his number's up on this plaque." I mean, they couldn't even give me a card, which is a nightmare. So I'm still battling them because I want them to refund me, and I'm still battling that. But it was one of those moments I thought, I am not going to support an unvaccinated employee. So I would have tipped her, and I thought, I am not tipping someone who is unvaccinated, and I am not supporting an unvaccinated employer. And I'm just curious how you guys feel about that, if you talked about it within your house or to yourself.
Well, Rob wouldn't go back to daycare until I knew everyone was vaccinated. We just couldn't. And I told them, we're not coming back until everyone is vaccinated.
And
And
then
that's,
how did they
that's,
respond when you said, I want to know that everybody's vaccinated?
oh, they said, we certainly understand. And they have, they have people that they hire, but they had to make sure that all of their attendees were vaccinated as well, because try to keep a mask on people with dementia, it's not so easy. And so I was not going to, and you don't know where they were at home, I mean, they tried to open as soon as they can because, a lot of people depend on the day center in order to work and so forth. And, but you don't know where they're working. You don't know if they're going in someplace. You don't know if they're vaccinated. It was like this mystery. And, so I was like, no, until I know that, people are actually vaccinated, we're going to take it cautiously.
Yes.
So, but
Rachel-
that was the only place. We don't go to any other places. So
Yeah. Yep. I think that's where it's going for me too. I mean, I went to get a massage for the first time in years, I mean, it was, anyway. Okay. So Rachel, how about for you?
I haven't really, I mean, I can't talk to my grandma about this stuff. She has pretty much no idea what's going on, but you know what? I really don't go anywhere. I don't even pick up, I haven't been in a grocery. I went to Aldi like a month ago. Before that, I hadn't been to the grocery store since April of 2020. I do not intend to return to the grocery store. My life is so much easier now. Like my mom always told me, like she always asked me why I didn't order groceries and whatever. And I was like, that's stupid. I'd rather pick my own stuff out. But now that I've done it this long, I don't ever intend to go back to the store. People are gonna do whatever they're going to do. You can't control other people. You can only control you, and whoever you pay, you hope you can control them as well. But you can't, I've given up on trying to control others. So, I'm going to buy what I need wherever I need it. And I'm still going to wear my mask and, make sure that you're far away from me. I don't I'm just going to do everything I can on my end to protect me and, my grandma. And that's all you can really do. But I guess if somewhere I really enjoyed going, was it was obvious that people weren't, following procedures, I probably definitely wouldn't go back there. But I think there's little that you can do to, to really control the behavior of other people. You can't count on them to get the vaccine and be careful as we can see. So I just don't go out. I've been making a lot of stuff. I've been, recycling and upcycling a lot of things, I try to, I was already pretty avoidant of other people to begin with, but I'd say that COVID has exacerbated that part of me to the point where I just don't want to have anybody around me at all, unless it's absolutely required. So I actually don't mind it, although it does that has been, of all the challenges, being isolated. I mean, because there are times where you want to be around other people. That's probably been the biggest thing. And then, I don't have any family. I don't have many friends. The friends I do have also have, people that I care for that are vulnerable. And so, like Sharon said, it's really just us, and I don't, that's been the biggest, the most defeating aspect of caregiving now and before COVID. Like Sharon says, I don't think it matters if the person has Alzheimer's or not, or some kind of dementia. I think that people tend to stay away. And maybe it is because, like Sharon said, they're afraid you're going to ask them to do something, or they might, have an experience that's uncomfortable. So I don't know. I kind of secretly kind of was like, well, now everybody kind of knows how we feel, but it doesn't last. Like, that didn't stick. People are still selfless, and they are only selfish. I mean, and only out to, take care of their own best interests. Like nowadays I have my 89-year-old grandpa and like 2 other people are the only ones who check on me, which is pathetic. So, it's unfortunate that, in the midst of this global pandemic, people are not embracing the values of compassion and, humanity. Instead, they were in such a rush to get back to life, get back to normal, which normal wasn't so great for us to begin with. So I was like, whatever, back to normal. Okay.
So Mark, what are you, I can see you nodding in agreement. What are you thinking?
Well, obviously we trusted people to keep their masks on. They didn't, right? And that's how we ended up in our January situation. So beyond that, and Rachel hit it right on the head, we can't control other people, but being 6'5" and 220 pounds, and if I'm out in public, I definitely have an influence on other people that are not respecting my space. And I have become more stern and more vocal and downright mean sometimes if I have to be. I had somebody hovering over my back and I turned around and I said, "What the are you doing?" Right? "Oh, I'm sorry." "No, you're not. Step back." There was distance. That was perfect. I haven't run across anybody overzealous. Usually people will just tend to stay away to begin with. And I just try not to put myself in those situations and keep my distance and go. And typically I usually have enough buffer room, but that's the only change that I've seen about not being able to control everybody's behavior. I just have to be really, really protective of mine. Right. And I think that is a bit selfish on my part, but at the same time, it's one of these things that you really can't control. And, I got to think about other people besides me, and they need to keep back. They need to do what they're supposed to do, whether they agree with it or not.
Yes. Once again, the burden falls back on us,
Yep. Absolutely.
I really feel this very strongly that I can really impact change with my pocketbook, which is why I ask businesses, are your employees vaccinated? And if they are not, I take my business elsewhere. And I really think if you are an employer that does have vaccinated workers, there are some that put up a sign that say, we are completely vaccinated. I appreciate knowing that. I want to know that, obviously, because I ask. So we've talked about the challenges during COVID. Yesterday, we also talked about, was there anything that was better? Which seems like such a crazy question. Was there anything that was a little better for you during the pandemic? And I'm wondering what you guys think about that. Oh, Sharon, go ahead. You're muted.
I'm sorry, the dogs are barking. The going to the doctor became much easier because of telemedicine, and we're continuing that. Now we're only going in to see Rod's primary care every 6 months, instead of every 3. And actually, it's been over a year since he has been physically into the office. So the telehealth has been terrific. I just enjoy that a lot, especially with, there are days when he's like, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't wanna do-" So, getting him in the car is hard enough. Getting him out of the car at the facility, and if anybody does something that he doesn't like, then I got to worry about what he's going to say. And so, yeah, telehealth, big
Okay.
boom.
Okay, I like that.
Conferences being Zoom. I can continue to be involved in my advocacy because it's all on Zoom now. They're continuing to do that. So even if it's in person now, they also have Zoom. So Zoom and telehealth, the bomb.
Yeah, I would agree with you about all the different virtual events. I used to travel pretty regularly, and I think about how much I traveled, especially in 2019. I think, why did I do that to myself? It was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And I always had to fly Southwest because I had to be available to return home if something happened. And that's the only airline where you could get full refund, and they would be very flexible. But that meant I had to actually drive really out of my way. So I lived 10 minutes from O'Hare, but I had to drive to Midway, which is on the other side of the city, or to Milwaukee. So not traveling, oh my gosh, I just can't imagine going back to that. That just was awful. That was just awful. You just never knew. So I agree with you. It was great to be able to participate virtually in a lot of different events. They were much less expensive. Well, just the registration. And then of course, when you eliminate the travel expenses. So it was really affordable. I participated in Wall Street Journal events, fortune.com, all kinds of great events that I really was grateful for. Okay. Rachel, how about for you?
Oh, well, I guess I would echo what Sharon said about the Zoom, which I find hilarious because before COVID, I was a hugest advocate of virtual meetings and this and that. And in my past life, we were Zooming before anybody else. And now like that's all everybody's doing. I'm burned out on it. Honestly, I was burned out on it before COVID, but nobody I actually know has invited me to a single thing like that, which is fine because I probably wouldn't go anyway. But I think it's absolutely wonderful that people are connecting this way now. I'm glad to see it, and I don't do health care in general, but I will say, like I mentioned earlier, ordering groceries and supplies. I was already a big Amazon person. Don't hate me, or whatever. But I can't imagine, all the time that got sucked out of my life, grocery shopping and stopping at the store and this and that. And like, I've completely eliminated that. And like, I feel like, that alone has made a huge difference for my life. Being able to just pick up groceries and have them throw it in your car, or they could be delivered to your door. That has been a tremendous thing. I wish I would have listened to my mom. Like, it's the second time she told me something I ignored her, and it was a huge thing. So, I think that's one. I hope that all of it sticks. I really do. That's all I have to say.
I also struggle a little bit with Amazon because of how they are as a business. However, I will say, as a consumer in a caregiving situation, there is nothing like Amazon. So I think I talked about my mom being hospitalized with a heart attack a few weeks ago. When we were waiting for her bed at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., she said to me, let's order those pants that we've talked about. So I placed an order on Amazon in that little ER cubby, and the pants arrived to their house the same day that my mom arrived home, which I think is just kind of fascinating. So to be able to shop for my mom, to give her choices, and then to have the product arrive has really been great. The challenge, of course,
And
is if it doesn't fit, that's frustrating for her, but it's just been nice to be able to shop for her and involve her in the shopping process.
And you can, I mean, no company is perfect, but I mean, you got to think about how many people are employed thanks to, you know, us ordering things because we need them or want them at home. Like, so I guess there's always going to be disadvantages and advantages of whatever you do, and you just have to weigh, you know, what's important to you. But yeah, I don't ever plan on going back in the grocery store ever again. I'm not going to say never, but I do not plan to. No.
Mark, how about for you?
Welcome to the fold. I've been working at home for most of the last decade. So these meetings are nothing new for me, you know, the telecommuting and everything. So there's been no change there. And even we ran across one of our neighbors and they saw us walk in and go, well, this probably isn't much different for you, is it? I go, no, it's not. Just another normal day in a pandemic. I think what's really been good for us, and we're kind of catching up to finding out what's good, right? We were so involved in keeping, you know, the lights on, I guess we'll call it, that now we're looking at, hey, you know, not so much, we're not great at self-care. I don't think any caregiver is you know, perfect at it by any stretch of the imagination. We all try. But I think we're finding, you know, our rhythm of, hey, we need this special spot to do this. And we need to really think about the relaxation efforts of this and the ease of this. So workflow is definitely improving more than anything else. I mean, all the things that we've talked about ordering and Zoom and everything we've been doing, but I think we're doing it a little bit different now. We're doing it a little bit smarter. And so we're re-looking at everything we've been doing and how we can make it better, because while, you know, we have this uptick, eventually I do believe we will have some sort of normalcy. Don't know what normalcy is going to look like in the future, but I do think that if our workflow is pretty solid and adaptable, we'll be perfectly fine. And that's kind of the hope.
You know, just quickly, let's wrap up with a conversation about the future. So Mark, you and I were talking before we went live, and you talked about that you have really completed some estate planning.
Yep.
And I'm just curious, I guess the first part is, did the pandemic push you into doing that?
No,
a little sooner?
actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So we actually were doing this pre-pandemic. Pandemic hit and we weren't sure how we were going to sign papers. That's really kind of how this went through. We had a really, really terrific attorney working with us, and she had some issues that, you know, obviously she wanted to take care of herself and her family as well. So, you know, if we needed to do an emergency, we were going to find a way, you know, but other than that, we just kind of kept through the planning process. But that was something in line. I wanted to make sure, because I'm not any younger anymore, that Lucas was going to be okay if Irma and I weren't able to be around. And so that was pretty important to me. We had gotten to the point where it's like, all right, let's solidify this. Let's get this into the ground, and that way we're solid and we can build from there. The pandemic did make that challenging to finish it off.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for us in a caregiving situation is that oftentimes the future is just the next moment. And so what we're trying to manage is the next moment, and the future then doesn't seem like it. The future is the next moment, which means how can we think about the next 6 months or the next year? So sometimes it is kind of hard to plan, but we know the importance of planning. It's just taking the time to do it and then figure out what's the plan. So I'm curious, Rachel, have you done any planning for your future?
No. I have like an unofficial POA that needs to change because he just recently got married, and you know how that goes. Actually, I was just talking to my cousin. She is younger than me, and it was not related to COVID, but more related to Alzheimer's and yeah, no, I don't, you know what? It's probably working against me, but ever since I became a caregiver, I try not to think or worry about the future. I know that's probably not the smartest thing. I know that there are a few people close to me that would act on my best interests and do the best they could to fulfill my wishes. But I really, when you're in the thick of caregiving, you just cannot think about, the future. I mean, I have, dreams and wishes and goals, that I keep in mind when I know that my caregiving mission will be complete, but I just have to stay in the moment because otherwise, you miss it. It's gone in a flash, or you let your guard down and something terrible happens, which, that happens. I mean, it's true. We all know it. So, no, I think I probably would be smart to do something like that, especially as I approach my 35th birthday, but I don't have anything, official in writing, no. I think I do have beneficiaries on my bank accounts. Like, if nothing else, you should do that. That's like, one thing you can do that will make your life a lot easier if something happened to you is make sure at least your bank account has beneficiaries on it. That's all I have to say about that.
Sharon, how about for you?
Well, because of the diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia, we went to an elder law attorney. We had paperwork, but we needed to refine it, and we had to think about protection for Medicaid. We had to think about asset protection for Medicaid if Rod needs long-term care. So, that was a worry for us. So we had that all done. Actually, had to have part of it redone because here in Georgia, the power of attorney was solidified more, and so we had to have the new language in, so it was accepted by banks and everybody else. Because there for a while, banks wouldn't. They were like, "Nope, sorry, we don't do that," and they toughened it up here in Georgia, so they have to accept those POAs. So we had to have that redone, but we keep that up to date, and we always tell people when they're diagnosed with dementia, go see an elder law attorney, even though some of our people in frontotemporal are in their 20s and 30s. See an elder law attorney because they're the ones that know about Medicaid and protection of assets. And so we did that very early on, and so we've had that all in place. Thank goodness. I even have a post for Rod, a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. We have that signed, and I carry it with me. I have a little packet I take if I go to the hospital with all the POAs and the post. And I actually had a social worker at the hospital ask me what a
Yes, that is.
What's the post?
What's Rachel, did you just ask what a post was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No. Actually, I just wanted to say, okay, so I just didn't want anybody to think like I'm leaving my grandmother out of anything. We've, she had, her will and testament or whatever done, and they named me power of attorney I didn't even know it was happening, like before any of this even like before I even thought I would become her caregiver. Like, so on that side of things have been planned. Like, she's good, I just wanted to make that clear, and then as far as like a advance directive, we do have a DNR here. She is on hospice, and it's by the time I knew what was going on, it was too late to really make any of those decisions with her, because she's just not in the mindset of being able to embrace or understand that she's at the end of life, because most of the time she thinks she's between 15 and 30, but just decided not to pursue anything that would prolong this terrible disease. And so we're good with grandma. She's planned for, but no, I haven't made the plans. And isn't that how it always goes with the caregivers, you know? So
Yeah.
don't follow my example, but yeah, I just wanted to, I don't want anybody to think like I'm a mess over here with her. Just
Oh, no. No, we don't think that. We think that you are doing a great job and you're a great advocate. So we had been worried that my mom was going to die, and then it was my brother who actually died. So we've been going through the funeral planning process, and I am not putting anyone through that. So in the next couple of weeks, I'm joining the cremation society. I'm making sure that everybody knows, do not bury me, do not buy a plot, divvy up the ashes, don't spend any extra money on an urn. And if you want, feel free to have a memorial service when it's convenient for you. There is no time deadline on this. Make it as easy for you as possible, because it is not a good experience. It is not a good experience. So that's the one thing I've been thinking about my own future. I have tried to get my parents to sign the paperwork for their own cremation. I am still trying. It's been a long process with my parents. And so I'm hopeful that this will be the thing that makes them say, let's sign this, so that we don't have to go through this again. Because the reality is we'll probably have 3 people die within a short period of time. And I would like to make it a little easier for the next 2, as odd as that sounds. Okay. Thanks so much to you guys for joining me today. Thanks to Mark and Rachel and Sharon. It's great to connect with you and talk honestly about what our lives have been like. And we're going to get together tomorrow and talk about, well, what are the solutions? What can we think about in terms of problems and then solutions? And what can we do as individuals and what can we do within our community? Okay, thanks you guys. And thanks everybody so much for watching. I'm Denise Brown. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.